My name is Mark Hummel, and this is Mark Hummel's Harmonica Party. I'm sitting here with my friend John Nicholas, who I've known off and on for many years, and we haven't seen each other in, man, I want to say, I think Brussels. No, I saw you in Berkeley. I came down to that gig in Berkeley.
That's right, at Freight and Salvage.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, we are in near Fredericksburg, Texas, and we are at John's guest ranch. And we're going to talk to John for a little bit here about his amazing career in blues, because this guy goes back to really, you said 1966 is when you first went to Chicago?
Yeah, not 60, around 67, 68.
Okay.
Right in there. Yeah, 66 actually, I think
wow.
You're right.
Yeah.
It was in 66 because I graduated high school.
Yeah.
Just graduated high school.
And were you living in Ann Arbor at the time, or were you living in Rhode Island?
At that time, I just finished school and I was working up there. And I had met Hubert and all the guys in Wolf's band
in New York.
Right. And Hubert said, come to Chicago. And I said, hell yeah.
What an invite.
Yeah.
The one thing I want you to do is describe the first time you saw Howlin' Wolf.
Oh, man.
You were a teenager, right?
You know, we can't do that without me crawling around on all fours, you know, like Wolf.
That is so great. What an introduction to the blues that is, man.
You know, people have moments in their life that completely transform them, and that was the one for me.
Yeah.
Wolf knew it. He knew he had some putty right there, and he worked me over, man. I've never seen that.
And I like the thing about the way you said he got up and kicked the mic stand and caught it.
Yeah, he crawled up the aisle to the stage,
right.
And that band was playing Smokestack Lightning, and he crawled up to the stage on his knees, and then turned around while he was on his one knee, kicked the microphone stand around, caught it, and came down right in my face. Smokestack Lightning.
That's pretty awesome.
It was. Yeah. That whole week was awesome, man. I mean, I watched every night was a different drama.
Yeah.
But Wolf, he did not stand for no bullshit.
Yeah.
Can we cuss on this thing?
Oh, you can cuss all you want.
Okay, good. We want to keep it real, man. Anyhow, like
it wouldn't be a blues.
So the first night, then I went back to they told me come to the hotel, and they gave me a cot, and I stayed in Hubert in his room.
Right.
And met S.P. Leary and the guys in the band. And then Muddy's band was staying there at the Albert Hotel. Muddy's band,
New York, yeah.
James Cotton and Otis Spann were also in town. It was quite a time, you know. The next night went back to Ungano's, and Henry Gray was playing piano.
Right.
And so Wolf had been, I noticed the night before, see, Wolf didn't stand for no bullshit on the stage.
Right.
He had to be professional. Well, Henry liked to drink, and so did SP.
Right.
And the two of them were buddies, and they'd be talking in between songs.
Right.
And Wolf would turn around, scowl at them, you know.
Yeah.
But they didn't get the, you know, so the next night, you could tell Wolf was not going to put up with any bullshit.
Right.
And I saw him talking to both of them, man, before they got, you know, in between the first song.
Right.
Well, shit. They were already, Henry Gray was already lit up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's on the piano. Say this is a, you know, Wolf looking out to the stage, and the piano's over here.
Right.
And so they started talking again. Henry Gray and SP laughing and shit. Wolf turned around, walked over to the piano, and he backhanded Henry Gray. I mean, hit him, knocked him off the piano bench.
Unbelievable.
Smooth knocked him off the piano bench.
Done that.
And then Wolf turned around, walked back up to the microphone, and he goes, "Is everybody having a good time?" Like nothing happened, right?
Everybody but him.
And I'm sitting there, holy shit. Yeah. Now that's how to run a band, you know? But that was just one of many adventures, man. That whole
Well, I love the story about
that whole week. I mean, you'd be walking down the hallway at the Albert Hotel, and Otis Spann would come walking up. You know, hey man, what's going on?
You said they're all jamming in the basement. And stuff
Yeah,
like that.
there was a piano down in the lobby or down in the
Right.
basement, and I think I told you later on or earlier that John Sebastian told me from the Lovin' Spoonful that when they started the band, they would rehearse in the basement of the Albert Hotel.
Wow.
And I never did ask him if that piano was there. Who knows, man?
Yeah.
A lot of history there.
That's great. So Hubert Sumlin ended up inviting you to Chicago.
Yeah.
And did you stay there for a while?
I would just stay at his house, but I mostly stayed over with SP and Annette, his wife Annette, and they all lived on the west side.
Right.
And SP was out there on Longview, and he was just a few blocks from Miss Letha Jones.
Oh, right.
She was Johnny Jones' wife.
Yeah.
And so I became good friends with Letha. She was the sweetest lady, and she would have little rent parties at her place on the west side, and she'd sell illegal whiskey and cook some food, and people would come and play music. And that picture of Johnny Jones and Otis Spann with the Mexican hats.
Oh yeah.
At the piano. She had that piano.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I used to go over there and play that piano.
Yeah. Did he show you anything on the piano?
Oh, Spann. Well, by the time I was going out there, Spann had died.
But did Johnny Jones show you stuff?
Oh, Johnny was dead. He was dead before Spann.
Okay.
Yeah. But there were all these cats. I mean, the other people that I met that were in that whole scene, piano players were Sonny Lance Slim.
Right.
I met him early on.
Right.
Lafayette Lee.
Right.
Little Brother Montgomery. I met all those cats.
Yeah.
Man. And they all were very...
You ended up touring later with Roosevelt Sykes.
I met Sykes a little bit later, early 70s. At in Ann Arbor. I met Sykes around 1971, somewhere right in there. And then he got him to come play at that Blind Pig, and then I started playing with him. Yeah. He called me six string.
And Boogie Woogie Red, speaking of piano, Boogie Woogie Red was really your main buddy that you played with all the time.
Well, I got to spend a lot of time with Red, and Red had learned from Big Maceo.
Right, exactly, when he was in Chicago.
He could do
Detroit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had a lot to do with starting the Blind Pig, too.
No, I didn't know. The Blind Pig was there.
But didn't you book stuff in there?
I brought in a lot of the cats that I knew because when Steve Nardella and I got to Ann Arbor, we started playing at the Pig.
Right.
And then, I don't remember how I met Red. It was through one of the festivals. And through, there were all those Detroit cats like Eddie Burns and Bobo Jenkins.
Sonny.
Bobo Jenkins,
Baby Boy Warren.
I played with all those cats.
That's cool.
And there was that whole scene, and Calvin Frazier, man, was still alive.
Cummins Prison Farm.
Badass
way
guitar
badass.
player. And he was related to Robert Johnson.
Wow.
And he was very close with Robert Jr. That's how I met.
Yeah.
Calvin was through Robert Jr.
Okay.
And so, there'd be these house parties in Detroit that were really wild, man. A lot of cool shit. But it was a scary place, man.
Oh, I bet, man. Detroit's always been heavy.
Yeah. But it's, and so we had all of that scene going on. And then at the Pig, we just started, I'd call up people, and then they started calling me. So
would this be people you met when you were hanging out at Hubert's or whatever in Chicago?
Yeah.
And they'd call you. So you told me you had Eddie Taylor out there.
Oh yeah, man. We had the Apple Grove Garden Club.
What was that?
Well, we had this place out in the country right outside of town, and it was like a little bitty old shack. It was just like a big downstairs room and two rooms little bedrooms upstairs and a kitchen. And my friend had an old motorcycle that the guy that was my buddy out there, and he had bought this Vincent Black Shadow motorcycle in parts. The damn thing was in the middle of the kitchen, but we still cooked and everything. But so the guys were coming up and staying with me, different cats, and started with Mac Thompson and S.P. Leary, and Mac was a bass player, Syl Johnson's half brother.
Johnson's brother,
and he had played with Sam.
Right.
And he So he started playing with me. Well, we said, well, man, we need to grow some stuff out, get some stuff in the garden out. So we went out back, we dug up a garden. So then we started planting stuff, and we'd have a garden going. And then all the cats, when they would come up, so pretty soon, you'd have SP would go back to Chicago, and he knew Eddie Taylor was coming up the next week.
Right.
So he'd call up Eddie Taylor, he'd say, man, make sure when you go up there, you got to weed around them tomato plants. And
Right, because all those guys gardened.
Oh, shit, yeah, man.
Yeah,
All the cats were from the South.
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
so we had, we called it the Apple Grove Community Gardens, man.
That's great.
And it was so cool. And that was a place where everybody stayed. They all stayed with me.
Right.
And Coco Taylor and her husband Pops. And,
Right.
I've got, back then it wasn't so easy to take pictures.
Right.
But I got a lot of pictures, man.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of that
awesome.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then, we go back and forth. I was playing with Walter.
Yeah.
A bunch.
Now, did you meet Walter in Chicago and
Yeah.
then bring him out to?
I met Walter and I met Walter through Johnny Shines.
Right.
And that was late 60s.
And those are two guys in particular that you got very close to, both Johnny and
Yeah, I did. And
Johnny
we
and
played,
Big Walter. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they were gracious enough and good enough friends, and they when I made my first album on Blind Pig,
Right.
I asked them to play, and they
Right.
on a song.
Right.
They said, "Man, what do you want us to do?" So they came in and they played on a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's
and then
great.
that's the stuff we found later, years later. That was, I thought we only had one outtake from that session. There were 20 more songs that I've forgotten about.
Wow.
You know what they say about the 60s and 70s.
If you remember it, you weren't there.
Right. And so, anyhow, we found all this cool stuff with Red, Boogie Woogie Red, and Johnny Shines and Walter.
Snooky, was Snooky on
No,
some-
I didn't know Snooky at that time.
Okay.
No,
So
I
you
met
met
Snooky
Snooky
years
a little
later.
Yeah.
And he knew about me. He was working for Pat Day, and he knew Pat Day told him about me and Big Walter. And
I
Snooky
see.
was fascinated.
He was
said-
fascinated with Big Walter.
Yeah, and he was like, "You really played with Big Walter?" I said, "Yeah, Snooky, I played with Big Walter." "Well, how'd you do that?" I said, "I just did what I do, you know."
Yeah.
He said, and he was very, very skeptical about it.
Right.
And then I played him some of those records that we made
yeah.
and some tapes that I had.
Yeah.
But he knew. He knew.
But you did 2 records, I think, with Big Walter under his name, right?
Yeah. Well, we did one record under contract.
Right.
Because Walter was very suspicious and he just didn't trust record people.
Right.
And I convinced him to do this thing for Blind Pig. One record, very simple deal. And so we recorded with my band, the Rhythm Rockers, backing up Walter.
Yeah. And was this when Ronnie Earl was in the band or not?
No,
Okay.
not yet.
So Ronnie, basically, his connection to Big Walter was really through you.
Oh yeah, Ronnie wouldn't have known Big Walter if it wasn't for me.
Right.
I mean, I'm not.
And you were the first
That's just
band
a
he
fact.
played with? Is that right?
I gave Ronnie his first gig.
His first gig, yeah. And then Sarah Brown's another one you went way back
Yeah,
with.
Sarah, I went back to Ann Arbor days
Ann
because she
Arbor,
was
yeah.
from Ann Arbor.
Right.
And Sarah and Franny and I,
Franny
some of the
Christina,
first stuff
yeah.
we did with Walter was right after Walter's album on Alligator came out.
Oh, okay.
And
The
so-
one with Eddie Taylor, yeah.
Yeah. And so we backed up Walter. Started traveling to the East Coast and around there. And yeah, that was some of the early stuff.
Well, tell me about the Ann Arbor scene, because I mean, the Blues Festival, the Ann Arbor Blues Festival was that was really kind of the first blues festival, wasn't it?
The Ann Arbor Blues Festival was the first, in
The
'69
first,
was
right.
the first blues festival.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 1970 was the 1970 Blues Festival.
And then after that, it was the blues and
And then
jazz.
there was a year in between.
Right.
And then John Fishel did the first two blues festivals,
Right.
which were phenomenal, man.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah. And then John Sinclair took over and made it the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival.
Right.
So, you know, we played on the 1972
72,
festival.
and you're on the album.
Atlantic
the Boogie
Records.
Brothers are
I'm on the album with
Yeah.
the Boogie Brothers and also backing up Johnny Shines and Boogie
Oh,
Woogie Red.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Johnny Shines and who?
And Boogie, well, with
Oh,
Johnny
Boogie Woogie
Shines,
Red.
and
Okay.
but
All
the
right.
band was my band,
Your
the
band.
Boogie
Yeah,
Brothers.
right.
And it was me and Steve and Sarah,
Right.
Franny,
Yeah, Steve Nardella.
and Nardella on harp.
Right.
And so, Johnny Shines did Dust My Broom on that album.
Okay.
That's the track they used anyhow.
Yeah.
And so, that was that whole scene was starting to explode.
Yeah. But to me, the very first two were the most amazing lineups of
They were.
the blues
For the
festivals,
blues, yeah,
the actual blues
because-
festivals, because that was like, Muddy, Wolf, Magic Sam.
Oh, yeah.
I know Musselwhite played there. Luther Allison. Johnny
Luther.
Winter.
No, Johnny Winter was
I thought
not
Johnny
on the-
Winter
not
sat
on the-
in or something.
Oh, he might have.
I think him and George Smith sat in.
He might
Yeah,
have. I
that's
don't
what it
know.
was.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
I was
Lil
not at-
Sonny was at that, I think.
I don't know. He was at the 72 festival.
Oh, was he? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Maybe
Yeah,
I got
I
those
do
mixed
not.
up.
I can't. I can tell you who was at the 1970 festival.
Who was that?
We drove out there with me and Duke and Franny and Barry Broadbent
right.
and
Barry's
Nardella
our- yeah.
and Nardella.
Right.
We all drove out there from Providence.
Oh,
Rhode
that's
Island.
right. Yeah, you had that story.
We had a
yeah.
band. We had a band called Black Cat.
Right.
Me and Duke and Franny and Nardella and
Right. And that was the one
Slow Drag.
Barry, you said managed.
Barry Broadbent.
Barry Broadbent managed it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we got there. We drove all night. We got there, slept a little bit, and woke up and went and got a cold beer and walked back. And it was Friday afternoon
Right.
when the festival started.
Right.
And little Junior Parker started out the show.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're one
And
of
it
the
was
few
from
people
there.
that got to see him, man.
Little Junior
tell you.
Parker. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's where I met Fred McDowell.
Right.
Who I later played with quite a bit around Ann Arbor and in
Uh-huh.
Mississippi. And so, I can't tell you who was at the 69 festival. I've looked at the lineup before, but I was not at the 69 festival, 1970. And then that convinced us to move to Ann Arbor.
Right. Okay,
All
so
that
the
stuff.
festival actually kind of was what got you guys to Ann Arbor.
Oh,
in a
yeah.
way.
Yeah. Me and Steve said, man, this is for us. You know?
Yeah.
Duke was really into the horns then, and
Right.
that's when he reformed Roomful of Blues with
Right.
the horns, and that whole legendary band was so great.
Yeah, yeah.
With Greg and Richie and Doug and
Right.
on horns and
Yeah. Who was the bass player that passed Prez? Right.
Pinky.
Pinky. Yeah. Pinky.
But he
Preston.
came in a little later. I mean, he wasn't.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't in the band when they
wasn't the original.
reformed.
Right. Okay.
It was a year or two, a couple of years later. I don't know exactly
Right.
when. Pinky
And you
was
said you and Duke grew up, went to high school right across the river from each other.
That's right.
In Rhode Island. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the other thing is, and Bill Kirchen told me this yesterday. He said he got the Boogie Brothers to Oakland.
Well, no, Cody got us to Oakland. We
Really?
opened up a show at the Hill Auditorium, which was a big music venue in Ann Arbor.
Well, maybe that's what I'm thinking.
And,
that Cody got you guys out.
And we
Yeah.
opened up for Cody, and they really dug us, and
Right.
and we dug them, and they said, "Man, you need to come out to the Bay, to Oakland." And we were like, "Well, sure, why not?"
So
and
did-
Franny's wife Julie had a Volkswagen bus. The starter was busted on it, So we pushed that van all the way across the country. I mean, every time we had to start it. You know
That sounds like what happened to Cody's van. They said 12 of them had to push the bus up a hill one time.
We stopped on the way. We stopped on the way down and saw in Como, Mississippi, and
Wow.
spent a couple of days with Fred McDowell and his family, and then
Crazy.
on over through Texas, and then we got out there to East Oakland one afternoon, and here came. It was Lance Dickerson's place.
Right.
Lance and Buffalo Bruce lived together.
Right. And they were already
I knew
in Cody's
Buffalo
mill.
Bruce from him playing with Sam. And
Right.
I met him in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah,
he's on that Live Magic Sam stuff.
Oh yeah.
Him and Sam Lay. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So did you know Lance from Ann Arbor?
No, I met him when I got.
Oh, you met him in California.
I met him in Ann Arbor.
Right.
When we played with him, but then when we got out there, I got to know him really well, and then later on we did a bunch of cool stuff together. He and I, when I was with Snooky, Lance played drums. We had a trio because I liked playing just with a drummer and a hog player. No bass player.
Was Lance on those gigs when you had Snooky and Rusty?
Oh yeah, man.
That's right, he was.
It was me and Rusty. No bass player. Me and Rusty.
That's right.
And
I forgot about that.
Snooky and Lance.
I forgot about that.
Smoking, man.
Yeah.
You know, and that
Lance
was kind of
one of my favorite cats. Man.
That whole thing for that. I mean, I heard Hound Dog Taylor play, and I said, "Who the fuck needs a bass player?
Yeah, who needs a bass player when you can sell one?"
You know. And one of my greatest.
I heard Tucker came down to one of those gigs and sat in with you.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's the last time I saw Tucker, man.
Yeah. That was incredible, man.
Yeah.
I got to see Snooky twice when Tucker was playing with
Well, you know, Robert Jr. raised Tucker up.
I know he did. Man. Yeah. And Robert Jr. is another guy you got to work with quite a bit. And did you meet him in Cleveland?
I met him in Ann Arbor. But
in Ann Arbor. Okay.
We became very good friends. He was like a mentor to me, and him and his wife. And whenever I was traveling, I mean, we would stop and stay in Cleveland. I'll tell you one great story. With me and Walter stopped in Cleveland, spent a couple of days with Robert. And at that time, Robert's mother, he had brought her up from Helena. And his mother was staying in the room upstairs above and that was Robert Johnson's wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some heavy duty stuff,
yeah.
man. I never thought.
I got to know her. She was a beautiful lady.
What a trip. So what did she tell you about Robert Johnson?
Oh, I didn't ask much.
You never asked much?
I just asked her about stuff that
life, yeah.
Well, yeah, and mostly country stuff, you know. Right. Because my family had we always had gardens and growing up in a poor Greek family.
Right.
I mean, we weren't poor. I mean, we never wanted for anything. But we damn
But
sure
you were working class.
Working class people. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Right. And so
you're still working class, man. When
I am,
see you out there. See you out there fixing that broken water main. I know how working class you really are.
Well, she was a beautiful lady, but after a time, I could sit comfortable with her, and we'd just talk about farming, gardening, and making, and butchering animals, and making sausage, and all kinds of stuff like that. And then at one time, there was a letter, one of the letters that Robert Jr. sent me. He had a typewriter.
Right. Oh, interesting.
And so he would send me a letter, It's in that box set that got nominated for a Grammy.
Wow.
Found all the stuff from my Too Many Bad Habits album.
Wow.
For any blues freaks, it's a must-have thing. Yeah. And there's not a lot of those left because it was very expensive to produce.
Yeah.
But there are letters reproduced in there from Boogie Woogie Red.
Wow.
One from Robert Jr. where he talks about, because he wanted me to butcher a cow and bring it to Cleveland. So I was going to do it. We were going to do it.
Wow.
And get it butchered and then,
bring it to him.
Bring the quarters to him, and all the stuff. And so then I couldn't make the trip, and we were still going to butcher. And he sent me this letter, and he said, "Now about that damn cow," he said, "just butcher that son of a bitch, and pack him on dry ice and put him on the Amtrak."
Is that what you did?
No. No. I think I talked to them about it, but they said, no, you can't.
You
gotta
can't
have,
do that.
You can't.
Yeah. That's not legal. So did he show you stuff on guitar?
Oh, hell yeah, man.
Did he? That's awesome.
Hell yeah. But he didn't give that shit away.
No, I bet.
You didn't, Robert Jr. didn't.
He didn't like to.
He didn't like to. Well, I'll tell you a
give
story.
It away. Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. We were in a motorhome.
Yeah.
Going south because John Fisher, the guy that did the first
Right.
Ann Arbor Blues Festival, he had he put together this thing. It was called American Blues Caravan or something like that. And I was very honored because John included me in that.
Yeah.
As a part of the show. I was in the brochure, the program, and
That's
everything.
awesome.
And I was very honored. And it was different people came in and out of it, but the first one was Roosevelt Sykes,
Mm-hmm.
Robert Jr. Lockwood,
Mm-hmm.
John Nicholas, Big Walter Horton,
Mm-hmm.
Luther Allison,
Wow.
Houston Stackhouse,
Yeah. That's heavy history.
and one more, Robert Pete Williams.
Wow.
And so
That's almost like the American Folk Blues Fest.
it was pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Fisher was kind of
Copying that.
copying
Yeah.
off that.
Yeah.
And so we took this, it was like a caravan. Now, some of those cats were already in the South, like Sykes lived in New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and Robert Pete Williams was still in Louisiana somewhere.
Right.
Anyhow, but we paid this guy who was a harp player and had a garage, Pete Carnes.
Oh, I know him.
You know Pete?
Yeah, I remember him.
And then he became a
He
good
passed,
harp player.
but I remember him.
Yeah, he's dead now?
Yeah, he died.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I saw him play with J.B. Hutto years ago.
Yeah, Pete was a good cat.
He seemed like a good guy. Yeah.
He learned. He hired me. Gave me a job at his garage. See, I was
Wow.
playing 7 nights a week, but I always worked during the day.
Yeah.
Because I like having money in my pocket.
Right.
man.
Right. I got you.
You know. And so for a time I worked at his garage.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's where I wrote.
Was that in Portland?
In Ann Arbor, man.
In Ann Arbor, I didn't know he was.
No,
from
he
Ann
moved
Arbor.
to Portland, man.
Yeah,
He was
okay.
from Ann Arbor.
I did not realize that. Okay.
So I had the job working there. That's when I wrote Pump Jockey Blues.
Oh,
And that's
okay.
on that Ann Arbor, that blues, that Blind Pig reissued, the box set.
Right.
But Pete, so he had a motorhome, and we paid him, but we didn't. We just paid his expenses basically,
Right.
because he
He
wanted
was
to be
just
around
happy
all
to be
these
there.
guys.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So we started. We left Ann Arbor. Walter and them. Walter came with us, and SP, and then Robert. We picked up Robert Jr. They came up from Chicago. We
Right.
picked up Robert Jr. and Gene, his bass player,
Cleveland.
in Cleveland.
Gene Schwartz.
And then we headed south, and we played along the way. I played in Louisville, I think. We had a couple of gigs just with that part of it
Right.
along the way. We stopped in Atlanta and picked up Fats Jackson.
Oh yeah,
You know
that's
who
who.
Fats
Yeah, that's
Jackson
who
was?
Wes Starr played a lot
And,
with. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Fats Jackson.
And he played with Little Walter.
Big time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they told me, and Robert had told me stories about him. And Fats could play 2 horns at once.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And they had a routine when he was playing with Walter, with
Right.
with Robert and Little
Yeah.
Walter, and Fats Jackson. And Fats Jackson, Little Walter would get on Fats Jackson's shoulders,
Right.
man,
Yeah.
and with his mic, and
Right.
Fats would be
With the
playing
2 horns. That's crazy.
Little Walter on his shoulders,
Yeah.
man.
So they were all
through the
walking
audience.
horn section.
Yeah, yeah. How
That's
about that?
awesome.
So
That
then
is so awesome.
we
Yeah.
wound up down.
I'd
in-
heard that story.
Yeah,
I didn't know
yeah.
it was Fats though.
It was Fats
Yeah.
Jackson. man.
Okay.
Yeah, and we wound up down in Miami, where that trip culminated. It was a big blues festival at the University of Miami, and that's where Roosevelt Sykes joins us, and
Yeah.
Robert Pete Williams, and Stackhouse, and so yeah, it was phenomenal, man. It was phenomenal. We
amazing.
backed all those guys up.
That's amazing.
There's
You can't buy an education like that.
Well, no,
That's like
man,
something. That's like something so few, the white blues players got a chance to really do.
Well, I don't
you
like
know.
to use colors, man.
Well, but
I
you know
don't
what
like
I'm
that
saying.
shit.
I mean, the younger generation. That's a better way of putting it.
Younger
The
generation.
younger generation. I mean, guys like us, we're lucky enough to,
I mean,
to,
I know
to
some-
meet those guys. and
I
play
know
with them.
some white blues players that were as badass as anybody ever, and I know some black blues players that ain't worth a shit.
Worth a shit.
So
yeah.
what, you know,
right.
I don't think in those terms.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Well, I mean, the bottom line is with blues, I think, is that it's a passed down
It's the universal
tradition.
language.
And it's a passed down tradition. You know, the
Absolutely.
old guys
That's
passed it on to the younger guys.
Well, yeah, and that's
If they
why,
were paying attention.
That's why those cats
Right.
were real artists, and they knew that if guys like you or me or anybody
Was
that
into it.
really was
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
it and showed humility,
Right.
they would allow them to come and be their apprentice.
Exactly.
And they would
Exactly.
mentor these guys. I
Yep.
wasn't nothing unique. All I did was show them respect and
Right.
and desire to learn their music.
Yeah,
And man, it was like I was part of the family.
exactly.
Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah.
I mean, on
Yeah.
and on. The whole
Yeah.
scene in Chicago was so beautiful on the west side.
Yeah.
Until all them goddamn
Till
gangbangers
the
started
gangs got
moving
in.
in.
Yeah,
Man.
right.
Blackstone Rangers. They were the first
Yep.
ones.
On the
me
west
and
side,
Steve.
yeah.
Me and Steve. We had a couple of cops saved our life one night on
Really?
the south side. That's
Yeah.
where the bad shit started happening.
Yeah.
And we had gone down to Pepper's Lounge, and it was late. It was after, and we were walking to the L, and this unmarked car pulled up. The guys pulled, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And this cop gets out here and flashed his badge. He wasn't in a uniform. He said, "Get in the car." I said, What?" And they said, "Get in the car." And we got in the car, and they said, "You look back there. There were 3 or 4 guys walking up behind."
Wow.
He said, "Those are Blackstone Rangers, and you boys fixing to be mugged."
Wow.
They took us to the L station and got
That's
us on the
amazing.
prison.
Yeah.
But after that,
Yeah.
that's when Wolf and all those cats on the west side was what a scene, man.
Yeah.
Everybody had a little garden in their backyard.
Right.
Wolf had his boat back there, so
Yeah.
he'd be back there working on his boat. We'd go fishing on Lake Michigan, man. You know, go to Comiskey Park to see the White Sox play.
That's great. With Wolf?
I never went with
Oh,
Wolf.
okay.
I went with Walter, a bunch.
Walter,
of,
okay.
SP and Mac Thompson like baseball
Right,
too.
right.
Johnny Young too, man.
Wow.
Johnny was
So
a
you
cat.
knew Johnny, yeah.
Oh, I knew
Yeah.
Johnny well.
Yeah.
He was hyper cat, man. He
Was
just
he?
talk a mile a minute. he reminded me of Doug Somm, man.
Did he?
Yeah, Doug was
Yeah.
that way. But just
Yeah.
he was just so animated. And I talked to Johnny 2 days before he died, man. He called me up in Ann Arbor because he was going to come back up to Ann Arbor. He
Right.
came and played up there at the Pig with me, and stayed at Apple Grove, and so we had a big comfortable couch downstairs, and that's where most of the cats slept. So I had brought him. I said, we played at the Pig, and we went back out there, and I said, Johnny, I said, I got you here's some bedding and a pillow and all that stuff. And he said, "Oh, okay, man, thank you." You know, and I went upstairs to go to bed. We'd been playing and drinking and stuff.
Right.
I got up in the morning and came downstairs, man, and he was sleeping on the floor.
Wow.
And I was like, well, shit, you know. So when he woke up, I would make coffee. I said, "Man, what you sleeping on the floor?" He said, "Oh, man, I can't sleep in no bed."
Wow.
I said, "Really?" He said, yeah, no, I can't sleep in no bed. I like to sleep on the floor.
What a trip, man.
Yeah. Hound Dog Taylor, man.
Was he like that?
Well, yeah, Hound Dog Taylor couldn't sleep. Hound Dog Taylor couldn't sleep with the lights out.
Really?
Yeah.
Because he'd get freaked
None
out.
of the cats
huh?
could room with Hound Dog Taylor. He just had to have the lights full on and the television on full blast.
Yeah, I know a lot
And
of guys
then he
like
could
that.
sleep.
Yeah.
You know. Now you know why they called him Hound Dog, right?
No.
He had dew claws, man.
Well, I knew he had an extra finger, right?
Well, yeah, like a dew claw.
Yeah.
He had 2
yeah.
of them.
On each hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that. I've seen photos of
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah.
I
You call
played
that
with-
a dew claw, huh?
Well, that's what it is on an
Is it?
animal, on a
Really?
dog.
Yeah. Interesting.
I-
So that's why they called him Hound Dog.
Yeah. So I was at the Blind Pig one night
Right.
listening to Hound Dog and Ted and Brewer.
Yeah.
And I'd just post up right next to the stage whenever they'd come in. And I had been to Chicago. Those guys knew me. Brewer knew me. And so Brewer busted a string on his guitar. Well, I found out later he broke it on purpose because there was this chick that he was trying to get next to, you know. And so, Johnny, get your guitar.
That's
man,
great.
I had my guitar. I had my
That's
guitar
great,
right there.
man.
I just took my guitar out and plugged in, and I just fell right in with him, man.
That is fun.
And there was a cat from Iowa, blues guy. I don't know if he's still alive. His name was Wes.
Wes Race.
I think so.
Yeah, Wes Race. He's the guy that got Hound Dog signed.
Yeah.
To
And
Howlin.
Wes
Right.
K. He was there at the club.
He's still around. I talked to
and we
Wes.
played. I just played the whole night.
He lives
with him,
in
man.
Dallas, actually.
He's still alive.
Yeah.
You
He
got
lives
his
in Dallas.
contact?
Yeah,
info?
I'll send
Oh
his
man,
contact.
send it
Yeah.
to me, dude.
Sure.
And you can confirm the story with
Yeah,
it.
no, I believe you.
So I just played the whole because he supposedly busted a string at the beginning of the set, and he went off
a
with
way
a
to go
fix, and he never came
go
back.
to pick up a
But those
check,
cats
yeah.
in Chicago did that shit all the time,
Oh,
man. I
that's
saw that
great,
happen so
man.
many times.
That's great.
And so I just fell in, man, and we rocked. It was so great playing
bet,
with Hound Dog and Ted. Played the whole night, and we got done, and and Wes Race walks up, came up to me. He said, "Man, I've seen a lot of people try to play with Hound Dog, and none of them that."
And you pulled it off.
He said, "You could really, you know."
That's awesome.
You were really.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I said, thanks, man. That's just what I do.
Yeah.
And whatever God gave me a gift, a blessing, or whatever. But man." That was. I'm so glad to hear he's still alive.
Yeah,
I gotta
he's still
talk
alive.
to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started coming south after I got out. When I got out of high school, man, I went to college. Not because I wanted to,
Yeah.
but my mom and dad, poor Greek, my grandparents all immigrated from Greece,
Right.
and I talked about this with Johnny Otis one time. I mean,
Right.
the Greek and I used to tour in Greece. The Greeks love the blues.
They do.
It's the blues
Yes.
people, man.
Yes.
Their old rembetika music. I had to learn what it was called. I had listened to it when I was a kid. But John Hammond was over there, and John was still a good friend of mine.
John Hammond Jr.
John Hammond
Yeah.
Jr. He's retired now.
Right.
And he came back and he said, "Man, I played with these cats. They play this old, really soulful shit." I said, "Well, man, that's what I used to listen to when I was a kid. We'd go to these weddings and parties, and they had these three-piece bands with this weird instruments, and they played this stuff that was so low down, man, the singing and everything." He said, "No, it's rembetika." And I said, "Oh." So then he turned me on to his agent over there, a guy named Johnny Angelatos, who had lived in New Orleans.
Right.
And I met there, it's a long roundabout story. And he started booking me over there.
Right. Right.
So, there was that whole thing. So I found out that the stuff I had been listening to when I was a kid that really was in that world of my Greek heritage world, but it was beautiful, and I dug it, and I dug all of that, all of that. But the music was so foreign to what I was listening to growing up, an all-American boy in the USA, because there was the stuff coming over the radio stations.
Right.
My big brother was a real... Well, I used to call him a hipster because a hipster used to be somebody that was super cool,
Right.
real badass,
Right.
On all levels. And now I find out that it's the complete opposite. I'm like, how does that happen? But anyhow, But my brother turned me on to so much stuff, man.
Yeah.
And then
is he your older brother?
My older brother.
Yeah.
He died he died in a car wreck when I was 15.
Oh my God.
But he got me started, and he used to buy a record. He'd buy because we'd listen to the stations. There was one station out of Cincinnati that we were able to get on the East Coast. I mean, so these AM stations back then were 1,000 miles. I mean, the range was incredible. The power that they had.
And there was that one that Wolfman Jack had too.
Yeah,
in El Paso, or where I think it was over the border.
Yeah. And
Nogales, or I forget where
It was incredible, man. People, but
you could hear it halfway across.
but we
the
would
United
get all
States.
these stations in, and then there were the good, what were they, stations in New York, there was Murray the K and the Swinging Soiree, and but it was all blues and R&B and really, really great American roots music, whatever you want to call it, but heavy on the blues. And my brother was into all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of my first memories were the Greek music, and then listening to the radio, and then my brother bringing home all these 45 RPM records, man.
Right.
And he would buy these packages where you could you could write to the radio station and send them $1.50.
Oh, really?
And they'd send you, because you liked a certain song.
Yeah.
So you'd get that 45.
Wow.
And then they would send you 8 more 45s for other stuff others to listen to.
Oh, wow.
Hoping you'd buy that stuff. And so we'd get these packages, man. And so we'd get stuff from, he got a lot of stuff from King Records. I think that there was a station in Cincinnati that was really powerful that he listened to. But I know that I have a lot of those records, a lot of King records, Bill Doggett, Freddie King, James Brown, the Stanley Brothers.
Oh,
that's what blew my mind.
They were on King?
Oh, yeah.
I knew Moon Mullican was on King.
And Moon Mullican.
Yeah.
And that's where I first heard those guys, and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
So there was all of that stuff. And we had family. My mom's family had down on the Gulf Coast, and so when I got out of school, I just started rambling. I went to school because I started to tell you, my folks, both my dad had scholarships to Yale, Dartmouth, and Princeton.
Wow.
Full scholarships.
Wow.
And he couldn't go because he had to go to work to support the family.
Wow.
There were 8 kids.
Yeah.
And he went into the Merchant Marines, and he studied, and he worked from a common seaman up to a captain in the Merchant Marines.
Wow.
That was my dad.
Yeah. So he really wanted you to follow through with
and my mother
education.
too. Yeah, because I mean they were, anyhow, and I, so I did, and I'm glad I did. I did. I was a great blessing, and to be able to get a good education. And but I always had bands. I had bands in high school. The Vikings was my band in high school. We used to have Battle of the Bands with Duke's band, the variations. And, and then in college, when I was in college, I had a band called Bilge. Anyhow, it got done with all of that. But I was always playing music and working.
So see, what I find really fascinating is how there was this kind of migration of musicians that really, I mean, I'm like you're one, Sarah Brown's one, Fran's one, that really kind of moved around the country. Well, and kind of got involved in different scenes. I mean, you're from Rhode Island. You lived in Ann Arbor. You lived in California for a minute, and then you eventually moved to Texas. Fran Christina's another that did that.
Well, Fran moved to Nova Scotia.
Right, but he ended up back in Texas when
I brought him to Texas.
You brought him back to Texas.
No, he didn't come to Texas to play with the T-Birds.
Okay, it was with you?
I got him the gig to join Asleep at the Wheel.
Okay, interesting.
When I was in the band, because...
Those guys tried to claim that they went and got him from Nova Scotia, but...
The T-Birds?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can tell you the whole story on that.
Okay.
All right, because Franny and Julie lived in Nova Scotia.
Right.
Jimmy Vaughn called me after the 72 Blues Festival. He had heard the radio broadcast.
Right.
He said, man, come to Texas. So, I went down there and met those guys. That was around 73, 74, right when the Antones was opening.
Right.
Stayed down there with Jimmy for about 6 months. What a scene that was. So then I left, and then they were coming up on tour, and then that's when I wound up. I went from Ann Arbor out. I followed my first wife out to Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was another whole story.
Yeah, that was
That's when I
scene,
started
too.
up. There was not much of a scene there, man. It was
Really?
nothing. It was nothing.
So the speakeasy really wasn't that much?
Speakeasy was happening,
Yeah,
but I'm telling
yeah.
you, for the size of
The
that
population,
area
right,
and the
right.
population,
Right.
there was some cool stuff there.
Yeah.
But that scene, it was a good scene, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it was nothing
Yeah.
compared to Austin, Texas.
To Austin or Ann
South
Arbor,
Louisiana.
yeah. Right.
Or Ann Arbor.
Right.
Nothing.
Or the
Couldn't
West
even
Coast,
come
for that
close.
The Bay Area.
Or the Bay Area.
The Bay Area had
The
a
Bay
great
Area,
scene,
man.
yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not. It's just Boston's kind of.
Yeah, it was kind of off the grid in a way.
Yeah, it's all that
Yeah.
Puritan vibe that's still around. But I got a lot of great friends in Boston, and I've met a lot of great people.
I have a lot of friends back east as well. Yeah, and it's sad, you know. I mean, Ann Arbor really just completely lost the blues thing.
I know, man.
I mean,
crazy
it's so sad
that it was that good, and it
because
just went to nothing.
I went back in '73 or whatever. I went there to check out the scene in Ann Arbor, and that's where I met Boogie Woogie Red and heard your name, and then I first saw you at just walking in the club at the Speakeasy in Boston, in Cambridge.
Well, that was a good thing that happened up there. I met Kaz, and I got him in the band.
And you got Kaz out
And I
here.
first started out, I had there were different people early on, but David Maxwell and I kind of formed that band.
Right.
And Maxwell, what a trip Maxwell was. I love that guy. And Maxwell really learned to play piano at the feet of Otis' band. He worshipped Otis. And
he actually spent a lot of time with him.
Yeah, I knew Otis, and I spent a little bit of time with him. That 1 week I told you about at the Albert Hotel, that's when I first got interested in piano.
Right.
You know, I was standing there watching.
Well, you're really a multi-talented guy because, you played guitar, you played piano, you play harmonica.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah,
master
I mean, do you play drums at all?
No.
Okay, but I mean, you certainly doing all that. You play harmonica. To be able to play all those instruments, that's it's a very rare thing in blues.
It's a gift from God, man.
Yeah. And singing and writing and the whole thing. So,
but yeah, man, I lived on the road. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I moved around wherever there was money. Good gigs and good music and good scene happening.
Yeah.
That's where you find.
Well, that's what the old cats did, man.
Yeah.
They did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And just tell me, how did you get an interest in bluegrass and country swing and?
Well, the bluegrass stuff I heard on those 45 RPM records when I was a kid. And it was the Stanley Brothers, man. Mm-hmm. They blew my mind.
Yeah.
I mean,
Bill Monroe at all?
Yeah, I dug Bill Monroe, but I didn't.
Not as much.
I didn't hear him when I was a kid.
Right.
I got into him a little bit later, and then, and yeah, man. By the way, right here where we're sitting, when we did this Moon Mullican tribute album, Peter Rowan came out, and he called me, and he heard we were doing this thing, and he wanted to come and hang out because he was going to be doing some stuff.
Right.
Shortly after that. Peter's a very amazing cat, and of course,
and who's on that record? Who's on the Moon Mullican record?
The core band is me and Rusty Blake from Portland.
Okay.
Plays with Caleb Clowder and Reed Williams.
Right.
Incredible country, old school but modern in there. Not old school, but just old school the right way.
Right,
right. They got it. And Rusty's this incredible steel player who Joel Savoy told me about.
Okay.
He said, we got to get Rusty on this session. I had Scrappy playing guitar, I had Chris Marsh on upright bass, and Tiff Lamson on drums from New Orleans and Lafayette, because I have a lot of connections. I spent a lot of time in the 70s in Louisiana.
Right, that's what I thought.
Cajun scene with Nathan Abshire and Dewey Alpha. But also, I brought the Rhythm Rockers down there a couple of times. Mm-hmm. I brought, I played down there with just a whole bunch of people, but mainly Link Davis Jr. And his daddy was famous Texas, in that whole school with Moon Mullican. Yeah. And what blew my mind about the whole South Louisiana scene and all those cats was and plus especially how it tied in South Louisiana. You go down there and you hear people like Clifton was the perfect example. That was real Zydeco. The
Yes.
shit you hear nowadays, I'm sorry.
No, because Clifton
That
had
ain't-
that. Clifton had such a huge blues element to what he did.
Clifton played waltzes,
Yeah.
played two-steps, he played shuffles,
Yeah.
he played blues, and he had that Cajun two-step, the Zydeco
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And the only part of that that's left now in these Zydeco bands, most of them, I'm sorry, is just that
Right.
really loud,
Right.
and really hard,
Right.
and Clifton just had that.
He had that
sweetness,
blues.
man.
He had that blues thing.
Well, yeah,
that was
he had
just
that.
so heavy. Yeah.
He was,
And he played harmonica too.
oh yeah, man.
Yeah.
I watched Clifton many
Yeah,
nights.
he
He'd
was
come
awesome.
into Antone's and
Yeah.
play for a week or 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And it was, and then I saw him a lot in South Louisiana.
He was
when I
real
saw
tight
him.
with Lightning, you know. Him and Lightning.
They were
Hopkins.
cousins.
Yeah, they were
They were
cousins.
related.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is with the Wheel, you eventually hooked up with the Wheel. Now, did you hook up with them when they moved to Texas, or were they in Ohio at that
No,
point?
I was in Texas before the Wheel was. But,
Okay.
But I had been down there with Jimmy, and then I came back up north, was working on this album for Blind Pig.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had most of the stuff I had recorded with Red and Johnny Shines and Walter.
Right.
And so then that's when Cody, we opened the show and he said, "You come on out to the Bay Area." And so
Okay.
we went out there and I landed at Lance Dickerson's house.
Right.
And that first afternoon when we got there, we were all wiped out from driving and pushing that
Sure.
goddamn
Yeah.
car across with no starter. And we got out there in the afternoon, late afternoon, and they said, "Well, hey, Cody and the guys are coming over, and the Wheel's coming too." And I said, "Who's the Wheel?" They go, "Oh, that's our new friends they're from West Virginia, and they're really great."
Oh, interesting. So you
And-
came out separate from those guys.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was
I-
me and
for some
Steve,
reason, I was under
me and
the-
Steve and Franny.
Okay.
And
For some
Julie
reason,
came
I was
out.
under the impression that
We
you
got
and the Wheel.
we got a little
Did y'all-
apartment in Berkeley, funky
Right.
part of Berkeley on
Right.
Shattuck Avenue,
Right.
with the bathroom down the hall.
Right.
We had rooms, you
Right.
know.
Kirchen told me he
you have
lived
to
in a
push
chick-
the fucking junkies out of the way. And
Yeah. Kirchen told me he lived in a chicken coop or something.
it was funky, man.
Yeah.
That's when
Yeah,
I
that's
mean.
what he was saying, yeah.
But anyhow, so we got there that afternoon, and so we said, "Well, that's cool," you know. So anyhow, all of a sudden, these guys, these hippies with cowboy hats start walking in with drums and stuff, you know. And it was Ray and Leroy and
Right.
Lucky and Chris. And
Conlon.
Dobkin was the original bass player.
Okay.
And those guys and Cody, they all came in and we just started jamming, man. We were
Right.
playing, you know, and I dug swing. I mean, I dug good
Country
swing.
swing, yeah.
Well, I dug swing.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I dug Count Basie, and I mean,
Right.
that's all that stuff was tied in.
Right.
So we started doing gigs together in the Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
and we would go around. Sometimes, you know, it'd be Boogie Brothers and Commander Cody. Sometimes Commander Cody or Sleep at the Wheel, Boogie Brothers. They just took us along, and we all split the money.
Right.
That's what kind of cats they were, and that's how we
Okay.
did. Sometimes we made $6 or $7 a piece, man.
Right. Mandrakes or whatever.
Mandrakes,
Yeah.
the Long Branch.
The Long Branch, yeah.
Yeah,
What was
and,
that? New Orleans house?
Oh man,
Was that there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we played a lot. We played down in Richmond. What was that club down there?
Oh, the Zydeco one, the one where the
well,
Zydeco
no, it
dancers?
was before they booked Zydeco. There's a big Zydeco community.
There's a
down
St. Mark's something. Right
Yeah, I
there.
think so, or something like
Yeah.
that. But we
Like a
just
community
became
center.
good friends, and then.
Yeah.
But I didn't like California that much, man. I mean, it was really cool because and then we got Skip Rose in the band, and he stole
wow.
he stole all our money.
Oh man, I've heard so many stories about Skip.
Yeah, and Musselwhite tried to warn me about
Oh
this
yeah,
shit,
yeah, yeah.
you know, but
Stay away from him.
And so,
stay away from that.
and that's
guy.
where I met, man.
He's nothing but
I
trouble.
loved all the cats out there, man. They were Grayson Street House Rockers.
Right,
Terry
right.
Hank was
Terry
so
and
great.
Rick Kellogg,
Rick Kellogg, Ricky worked with us too, man.
Did he really?
Yeah, Ricky and his brother.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. That's how I met all those cats. And Huey.
Huey Lewis.
Huey Lewis had a band called Clover.
Right.
Right. And man, we just had a blast. It was such a scene. We'd go up to Petaluma and down South Bay, and
there was a lot going on.
A lot going on, man.
It
was a happening scene. But I was anxious to get back. Chicago and Ann Arbor and South Louisiana were so strong on me. So I'd go back. Me and Steve hopped a freight train one time, and all the way from Oakland to Galesburg, Illinois. We made it that far. We didn't make it into Chicago.
What a trip.
We went over the hump on that thing in the freight yards. And luckily a guy had told us what to do when that shit happened.
Yeah.
But that's another whole story. I hopped freight trains, met a lot of really interesting people, man, in those hobo jungles.
That is something else, man.
Yeah, they'd be playing.
You've really done a lot of the kind of blues musicians' life of the old school.
I didn't think about it at the time.
Yeah.
That's just how we got around, and that's where.
I used to hitchhike all the time.
I hitchhiked a bunch too.
That was my deal. I hitchhiked all across the country. That's how I got to Ann Arbor.
I hitchhiked as well. But we got back to Chicago, and then Steve, he started up a band called the Vipers, and him and Sarah and George Bedard, George.
Which became the Silvertone.
It became the Silvertones.
Yeah,
they had a swinging little band,
right.
But I was more interested. I was hanging in Chicago, and I liked the Chicago blues stuff.
Right.
So I started playing with Matt Thompson and S.P. Leary and all those cats, and then I went back down to Texas, and Ray and them came down, had just moved out there. So
now they come from California.
They came from California.
Okay. All right.
And Cody told them about the Armadillo World headquarters.
Right.
So Ray and them moved out, and anyhow, we got together and recorded in the living room at Ray's house, which later became my house. And that stuff was the final stuff that we put on the Blind Pig album.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that you had a lot of those guys on that Too Many Bad Habits album.
Yeah.
Now, but you did join the Wheel, right?
Yeah, when Floyd and Leroy left the band.
Floyd Domino?
Yeah, and Leroy Preston. Ray hired me to take their place, which, good luck with replacing those two guys.
Yeah. How long were you in the band?
About 2.5 years.
2.5 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is way before Wes was in there.
Oh yeah, this was in the late 70s.
Late 70s.
Yeah, right. And I left, so between that time when we did that stuff, and then I was back in Ann Arbor, and then I took my wife out to Boston and got stuck there.
Right.
Which is another great story, but we don't have time for that, man.
Now, when you were in the Wheel, did you guys record?
Have who?
Did you record with the Wheel?
Yeah, I'm on the Serve Live, on Capitol Records, Serve Live.
Serve Live.
Recorded at the Texas Opera House.
All right.
Johnny Gimbel.
Oh, cool.
Back in, playing with us. I recorded Too Many Bad Habits, one of my songs.
Right.
We did that.
Really? Wow.
I did The Last Meal again.
Really?
Which was on the Ann Arbor
Blues on the Ann Arbor
Festival album.
And that's you singing that, or Sarah?
That's me singing.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Sarah got billing on
I
that.
know she got
John
billing.
Sinclair,
and Sister
Sinclair took it upon himself.
Right, I could tell.
We were the Boogie Brothers.
I figured
but
that.
This was this,
this
hippie, politically correct bullshit.
Right.
And they put the billing out. I said, man, my band was going to be
piss you off.
I was the lead. It didn't piss me off.
Well, but it's kind of cold.
It pissed me off.
It's kind of cold.
But I wasn't pissed off at Sarah.
No,
it wasn't her fault.
It was them.
It was them, And
right.
I get the program for the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival album with all these great cats on it. And here it doesn't say the Boogie Brothers with John Nicholas and the Boogie Brothers.
The Boogie Brothers with Sister
It
Sarah.
said the Boogie Brothers because we had a chick in the band,
Right.
it was cool to say with Sister Sarah Brown.
Right.
You know. Anyway, that's what it was.
Well, so what I was going to say is you were with the wheel for 3.5 years.
2.5 years.
2.5 years, and then did you start your own band in I know you linked up at Antone's, and you had a lot to do with.
Well, I brought the Rhythm Rockers down to Texas a couple of times with me.
Right.
And that's how that's how Sarah and Kaz got introduced to Texas.
Right.
I brought them down.
Band. Right.
And then when I joined the wheel, Chris O'Connell and I, and Lucky,
right,
we said, man, we need we had a really great drummer from Fort Worth named Chris York. And Chris was killer on all the swing stuff, but kind of the old school Bob Wills kind of swing and the boom chunk kind of thing. I mean, he was great. But he couldn't do the
Chicago Shuffle.
Chicago Shuffle and the Louis Jordan kind of shuffle and that kind of the jump blues kind of shuffle. That's what Ray wanted. We really wanted to do. And so we said, Ray, we got to get a different drummer, and I got hold of Franny.
Okay.
But you still haven't heard the story.
And that's
about how the T-Birds got connected.
Okay, tell me.
That was before I moved to Texas.
Okay.
So, see, you remember when I told you about met Jimmy and I spent some time?
Yeah.
Then they were coming up to Boston to play.
Right.
And I was up there. So Jimmy called me. They got up there. Keith called me. Because they drove up there and they had a guy named, what was his name?
Not Mike Buck.
No. Their first drummer was a guy named Lewis.
Oh yeah, black dude. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. And so Lewis, he drove in that van for 3 days. They drove all the way from Austin up to Boston.
Yeah,
he got to Boston, man, and he freaked out. He said, "Man, I got to get back home. I got to see my baby. I got to get back home." And he got on a Greyhound bus, and it took him 3 more days to get back to Texas. So they didn't have a drummer. And Jimmy called me up, and Keith called me up. They said, "Man, we need a drummer." I said, "Well, let me see if I can find Franny. I think he's up in Nova Scotia." Now, you might hear other stories about this.
I have heard.
But this is the real story.
Okay, all right.
And if Franny's mother were alive, she could testify to this.
Right.
So anyhow, I said, well, I'm going to go down to Westerly. I said, let me go see Mrs. Christina, because I said, they live in a cabin up in Nova Scotia. And so I went down to Westerly to see my mom and mom and dad. And so I went over to see Mrs. Christina.
Right.
And I said, Mrs. C, I said, I got to get hold of Franny. She said, well, you can call this number and that's the Canadian Mounted Police.
Right. That's the story. Yeah.
Well, that's the truth.
Yeah.
And she said, they'll give him a message, because they didn't have a phone or anything.
Right.
Okay, so I said, okay. So I got on the phone and I called up, and sure enough, it's the Canadian Mounted Police.
Wow.
And I said, hey, I got to get a message to this guy. I said, he's about some work. People want him to come and play, And so then the next part of it you can hear from Franny, but Franny and Julie are there at their place. And one day the Canadian Mounted Police come knocking on the door. Well, right about that time, they had been involved in some
nefarious,
some materials, herbal quality.
Right.
And they thought that they were so
under arrest.
Right. It was the Canadian Mounted Police with a message for Franny to go to Windsor, Ontario, and meet up with this band who he'd never met. And so I think he hitchhiked out there and met up, and then that's how he got connected with the T-Birds.
And
he finished that little run, and then went back to Nova Scotia.
And then they got him again.
They didn't get him again yet.
Years later or something.
Few years later, but it was. In the meantime, then I wound up, Ray asked me to join the wheel. I moved to Texas permanently and joined the wheel, disbanded the Rhythm Rockers. Ronnie went on with Sugar Ray to form the Blue Tones. And then later went, and so I had to call the Mounted Police again to get hold of
Oh
Franny.
my God.
Because I got him and Julie to move down to Texas, and Franny joined the wheel, and he was with me in the wheel for most of the time I was in the band.
Right.
When I left the band, Franny stayed not too much longer, and then T-Birds were getting hot.
And that's
And
when
that's
he
when
rejoined.
they,
Okay.
and then he,
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's when he
So
joined.
that's
the
how
T-Birds.
it worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Now he's pretty much retired. He lives down in what, Martha or something?
He's out in Marfa, Texas.
Right.
That's
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he still plays some.
Yeah. I saw him last year. He was playing at the Christina Fest thing.
Oh, yeah,
that they do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bobby.
Him and his brother. Yeah.
Bobby
Him and Bobby were doing that. They were both playing at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
Fun, yeah. So he sounded good. Well, anyway, I probably ought to wrap things up because I know you're busy and we got to hit the road here. So, man, I thank you again. What a great time we've had hanging around with you, and we love the Hilltop Cafe that you've had for what, 40 years or something.
43 years. That
43
was
years.
Me and my wife, and she
Yeah.
ran the restaurant part of
Right.
it. I always worked there, and I cooked too, but
Yeah.
I did all the music.
Yeah.
And I had the people that have played there just stopping by, friends of mine, and
Yeah.
people that came down to see me.
Yeah,
It's
it's an amazing,
amazing.
yeah.
And we just played.
roster
we
of
loved to
people
play.
you've had. Yeah,
Johnny Shines,
that's amazing.
Stephen Bruton,
Yeah,
Snooky Pryor,
yeah, that's awesome.
Hubert Sumlin,
That's
Pine
incredible.
Top Perkins.
Yeah, had Eric
Jimmy
Clapton
Rogers,
in there. Yeah,
Clapton came for
Came in,
Jimmy's
yeah,
birthday
right,
party.
right,
and played.
right.
Jimmy's played there so much.
yeah, yeah. Kirchen was just there. And
Oh,
Sue
Kirchen
Foley.
comes all the time.
Yeah.
Sue is
Right.
dynamite.
Sue Foley was just there,
She
yeah.
came. But going way back, it was people like, some of the really great. I used to have the Cajun bands come up because I had met
Oh,
my time in
okay.
South Louisiana. I really
Right.
dug the Cajun shit, man.
Yeah.
And I'd have Andrew Cormier and the Lake Charles Playboys and
Wow.
all these different cats that
Yeah.
were so great. And
You ever
all
rock-
those
you ever
cats,
have Rock and
all those
Dipsy?
cats. No, I knew Dipsy from
Yeah.
Anton's
Yeah,
days,
right.
and Buckwheat too, man.
Buckwheat, yeah.
used to come into
He was
Anton's.
great, yeah.
He would come into Anton's, and he had a pet raccoon.
Did he?
Yeah, and the raccoon would sit on his shoulder and then run around on stage. and
That's
shit.
great.
He had him trained,
That's amazing.
And those guys were crazy, man.
Yeah.
And Dupsy would. They did all these tricks, man. He'd hold a chair in his mouth and balance.
Dupsy did?
Yeah,
Oh, how crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
All that
He
stuff.
had Clifton's band after Clifton died. It was friggin' incredible.
Oh yeah, man. It's beautiful, beautiful times.
Well, thank you, man.
Thank you, Mark.
Love
Hummel.
you, Johnny. Yeah, man.